Ever wondered what happens when gadgets and eerie tales come together? Well, you're about to find out. Hit subscribe, join our ghostly journey, and get ready for some chilling stories in the world where technology and spooky tales become best pals. Ready to get a little scared? Let's go! One day, my family had Christmas dinner, and I was 8 years old. After we finished eating, my mom was cleaning up, my dad and sister were arguing about what movie to watch, and I was stuck at the table with a plate of yucky green beans. Granddad, who was wearing a funny pink hat from a Christmas cracker, was sitting across from me, smiling. But the strange thing was, he had been like that for 40 minutes, and no one else seemed to notice. My mom brought a cup of hot tea for Granddad, kissed his cheek, and talked to him lovingly. However, she couldn't see that he wasn't responding. Maybe if Granddad had been nicer and said please and thank you, she would have noticed. But he wasn't like that, so she didn't realize he was gone. I had heard grown-ups say that old people become invisible, but I thought they meant it literally, like you'd turn invisible at 60. I imagined all the fun pranks and secrets you could have, but I didn't want to tell anyone about Granddad just yet. And I didn't feel sad because, honestly, Granddad was mean to me. He wasn't a kind and wise old person, he was more like a grumpy Scrooge without any hope. I knew deep down that Granddad didn't like me, and I didn't like him either. That's just the way it had always been. Honestly, at that moment, I was pretty excited. I wanted to see who would notice Granddad first. In my mind, I played a movie, imagining how each person in my family would react. I knew my mom would freak out. She loved Granddad a lot, even though I didn't understand why. It was like he had some kind of special power over her. My dad, usually a tough guy, would probably try to stay strong for my mom. But I could picture him breaking down and crying when he finally realized Granddad was gone. And my sister, who always loved being dramatic, would act like Granddad was her best friend, even though they hardly ever talked. It was like a waiting game to see who would figure it out first. It had been almost an hour, and I figured it wouldn't be much longer. As my mom went back to the kitchen, she warned me to finish my food, but I could tell she wasn't really in the mood for strict rules. She had been drinking wine, so maybe that made her not notice the strange situation at the table. I hoped she would give in to my stubbornness, and then I could quickly eat 3 helpings of trifle before the Queen's speech started. My mom was kind of predictable when it came to being consistent with rules. I really didn't want them to notice Granddad until I had my trifle. That would be annoying. Speaking of Granddad, he looked like one of my action figures now. It surprised me how quickly dead people turn into something like wax. His skin had turned into a pale, creamy color. I see that color every week at the cheese counter in the supermarket. I thought about using my knife to see if I could poke through his fingers, but instead, I just stuck my fork under the nail of his index finger. When I first saw that Granddad had stopped breathing, I kicked him in the groin a few times to be sure. It didn't hurt to check twice. The fork went a bit into his finger, about a couple of centimeters, then hit the bone and stopped. I whispered to myself, "Take that, you old meanie." It was for all the times he pretended not to hear me and yelled at me to speak louder, covering me in spit. It was for when he tripped me with his cane and laughed at me. And those farts, always ready to embarrass me in the hallway, blaming it on me afterward. My friends' granddads were nice, taking them to the park or teaching them cool things. I would have been happy with just a simple hello from him, but that never happened. The only real smile he ever gave me was the one on his dead face right now. The rest of my family either didn't see how mean he was or were too scared to argue with him. Whenever I complained, they said I was too sensitive. I twisted the fork in his finger, moving it around, and saw the gross meat beneath his fungus-covered nail. It looked shiny, like hot lava. I felt powerful for a moment, but that feeling went away when I looked at Granddad's smiling face. But now, instead of just smiling, Granddad was grinning. He only had 3 teeth left, so it wasn't a big grin, but those worn-out yellow fangs were showing, and they hadn't been moments ago. I was so shocked that I let go of the fork, still stuck in his nail, and sat back in my chair as far as possible. I almost screamed for my parents' help but stopped myself from making any noise. I started thinking and trying to make sense of it. He was definitely dead, I was sure of that. I had waited so long to be sure. Maybe I used too much force with the fork, knocking his jaw loose and making it look like he was grinning. In school, we learned about how the body works with electromagnetic responses and chemical reactions. Maybe I hit a nerve ending, or it was just part of the decomposition process. I should have paid more attention in class and not doodled skulls in my science book. But a bigger question was bothering me since I noticed Granddad had passed away. What was he even grinning about? What thought made him so happy before he died? I wasn't sure I wanted to know because if it was enough to make him smile, it couldn't be something good. Maybe he just wanted to scare me one last time before leaving this world. The fear went away, and now I was grinning back at Granddad. I even had to cover my mouth to stop laughing out loud. I thought of a joke, like, "Hey Granddad, maybe I should. Speak up, boy. Let everyone know your worm food." But no, I decided not to say anything. I wanted to keep quiet and let him sit there for a bit longer. I looked at the fork in his messed up finger, and saw 3 small drops of blood on the tablecloth. Then a little stream of blood started flowing from his finger, and I regretted getting too carried away with my revenge. If anyone saw the blood, the game would be over too soon, and I might get in trouble for messing with a dead body. I needed to get rid of the evidence. I checked around, and my mom was still busy in the kitchen. I could hear my dad and sister arguing about which movie to watch in the living room. They hadn't decided yet. I pulled the fork from Granddad's finger, and some blood sprayed out. Then I turned the fork over and slid the prongs under Granddad's wrist. Using all my strength, like when I played those arcade claw games, I lifted his hand and moved it to the right above the hot cup of tea. Then, with the precision of a magician's trick, I pulled the fork out, and his bleeding hand fell into the boiling tea. My plan worked surprisingly well. Granddad's shrunken fingers fit perfectly into the cup without knocking it over. Just a few drops of tea splashed onto the table. The steam from the cup smelled different, like cooked flesh, still better than green beans. I grabbed the napkin from around my neck, cleaned up the spilled blood and tea, and sat back before Mom came back. She didn't pay any attention to Granddad, just focused on my plate. "Finish those greens in the next 5 minutes, or no trifle," she warned before going back to the kitchen. I knew I had plenty of time, especially when I heard the sound of a wine bottle opening. I slid off my chair, took the beans from my plate, and stuffed them into Granddad's cold mouth. They went easily over his toothless gums, like the easiest hole in one I've ever done. But he was still taller than me sitting down, so I could only get them in so far. I took a moment to remember this strange sight. He looked like an alien creature with green tendrils hanging from his mouth. I used my fork to push the rest of the beans to the back of his throat until they disappeared. Then I punched his mouth shut. The force made his pink paper hat slide down over his eyes, and somehow, his mouth formed back into a smile. "Mom, I'm done," I shouted happily. "Okay, dear," she replied, her words sounding a bit weird from the alcohol. With that, I left Granddad, unable to see, unable to talk, and all by himself. I won the vote for the movie, Muppets Christmas Carol, the best choice. We were just getting into the movie when Mom's scream made us all jump up. My dad and sister rushed into the dining room. I followed, trying to look upset and make some tears. In the room, they all started panicking. Soon, I joined them. Granddad wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't even at the table. He was on the floor, holding his throat. His skin, which was yellow before, now looked reddish blue. His arms and legs moved on the floor like my toys when their batteries were dying. Mom was on her knees next to him, crying and struggling to unlock her phone. Dad took charge right away, diving to the floor and trying to do some weird thing called the Heimlich maneuver on Granddad. The old man's bones crack like breadsticks. Dad tries to help, but it's not the kiss of life. My sister just screams from the corner, not helping at all. I quickly go to the vomit pile by the table, where no one has noticed, and try to crush any visible green beans into the carpet with my heel. My heart jumps as I watch Dad spend 10 minutes moving Granddad's body around like a piñata, but he gives up and starts crying like a baby. He's gone, Dad says, even though he's not a doctor. But it looks like he's right. Granddad stops moving and turns back to wax. Mom still can't unlock her phone, so I take it from her limp hands and do it for her. I knew her passcode by heart, like all good kids. Pretending to dial 999, thinking this nightmare is over, something burning hot wraps around my bare ankle. I look down, and Granddad's eyes meet mine, kind of. They're all white, rolled back like he's gone to sleep. He's holding me with his right hand, the burned one, full of broken boils that open and close like hungry mouths. Blood from his ripped-off nail runs down my foot and between my toes. He moves his lips, but no sound comes out. Instead, it gets so quiet as I stare into his eyes that I think I must be dead too. My mom comes to help me. She pulls Granddad off me and talks about how he needs to hold on and stay with us, but as soon as she puts him on his back, he's not breathing. Now that his lungs have stopped scaring me, I can finally breathe again. Maybe that last jump scare finished him off. Despite all his faults, you can't say he wasn't a fighter. Without me realizing, Dad took the phone from my hand and talked to the operator. He starts telling them what's happening, but then Mom tells him to stop. She arranges Granddad's arms over his chest and buries her face in his hands. That's what people do when they know someone's life is over. Then she starts crying for real. Her body shakes with sobs, making her smaller and smaller. I try to put my hand on her back to comfort her, but before I can, she stops crying. She looks down at Granddad's hands with a puzzled face. Quickly, she turns his non-burned hand over and takes out something between his fingers. It's small, like a postage stamp, and when she turns around, we all see the secret behind Granddad's last smile. I recognize the colorful, crumpled paper, one of those joke slips from our Christmas crackers. Usually, we just throw them away without reading, but Granddad kept his. Mom keeps staring at it, reading the tiny words over and over. Dad asks what it says, but she ignores him and keeps staring at the paper. I try to comfort her with a hug, but honestly, I just want to see what it says. It turns out to be something really weird. Here's a funny thing that happened when Granddad passed away. Question: what did Granddad say before he kicked the bucket? Answer: how far do you think I can kick the bucket? I thought it was a weird coincidence, but I figure that's all it was. I didn't think Granddad had a funny bone in his old body, but I guess if anything could make him laugh, it would be dark humor, even if it's not that great. Maybe that's why they make those jokes so bad, to make the good ones stand out more. It's like how meeting a really mean person makes you appreciate the nice ones. Basic human stuff. Turns out I gave myself too much credit. Granddad wasn't smiling at me, he was just smiling to himself. Maybe he found amusement in his own mortality, maybe even made peace with it, before he felt it slipping away. What else can a person do in that situation but smile? And then I went ahead and stuck green beans down his throat, an honest mistake. Now it's time for me to fake some tears and end this whole event. Dad hugs me and Mom with his sweaty arms. Then he calls my still screaming sister to join the family hug. Her annoying scream finally stops as she waddles over to us. I have to admit, being in the middle of that grieving group felt strangely peaceful, like going back to the womb. Living in that moment for a few minutes made watching an old man choke to death kind of worth it. A true Christmas miracle. Just too bad I never got my trifle. The thing that affected Granddad is called catalepsy. You might have seen it in movies or TV shows for dramatic effect, but I promise this was a rare real-world example. Definition: catalepsy is a medical condition where a person goes into a trance or seizure, loses sensation and consciousness, and their body becomes stiff. It also makes bodily functions, like breathing, slower. So, it turns out I acted too quickly. But to be fair, I was only 8 years old, and people usually don't recover from catalepsy. Death is often close, so you could say I just made it happen a bit sooner. You're welcome, Granddad. The official cause of death was choking, leading to a heart attack that couldn't be survived. Luckily, the coroner blamed the injuries I caused on my dad's clumsy attempt to save Granddad's life. Sorry, Dad. It was all neatly wrapped up, like a bad joke in a Christmas cracker. Mom doesn't talk much about that day, she blames herself too much. Nowadays, you hardly see her without a drink. When she's really drinking, her dark thoughts sometimes come out as words. So strange he should choke. I'm sure his plate was empty when I took it away. Why, the only food left on that table was your green beans. Then she'd give me a serious look, just for a moment, before washing away any suspicions she might have about me with another gulp of wine. Oh, what parents won't do for their children, huh? One small tradition has stuck around since that memorable day. Every Christmas, we gather at the same table and toast to Granddad's memory before having our meal. No one wanted to sit in the chair where Granddad passed away, so Dad got rid of it. Now, our 6-seater table only has 5 chairs. It bugs me a bit because it's not symmetrical, but something even more bothersome happens next. Even though I didn't get in trouble, I've been paying for my mistakes. Whether it's real or just in my head, I can't deny how real it feels. The moment our glasses clink, it begins. Sometimes it's quick, done in 5 minutes, or, happening more often, the whole thing drags on for hours. Speak up, boy. I hear the gravelly voice that only I can hear. Then, my nose burns from a smelly fart that no one else seems to notice. Finally, a burning tightness wraps around my ankle, the same place I got grabbed all those years ago, and pain shoots up my leg. The voice keeps going, I'll be here with you until you speak up, boy. Want me gone? You better tell them what you did, Granddad tells me. But I know better, he won't leave, not even if I wrote a confession to the police. He's enjoying himself too much. I can see a shadow right now, watching from the empty space where his chair used to be. Don't ask me how I know, but I promise you, he's still smiling. I guess there might be things I could try to stop the curse, if that's the right word for it. I could skip the dinner altogether, maybe not join in on the toast. Or maybe spend a bunch of money on therapy. But I worry that if I do any of those things, this bad stuff might follow me elsewhere. It seems like this ritual of torture suits Granddad's spirit, it kind of keeps him in check, and that's good. I figure, just like Christmas itself, you only have to go through this once a year, and it's better to be haunted with some company, I think. So, I try my best to get through the meal. I attempt to understand what everyone else is saying while the voice in my head screams. I try not to gag from the smell that makes my eyes sting. I talk when the pain allows and slowly eat what I can, but for me, that's probably the worst part. Since that Christmas when Granddad died, I've really struggled with my food. Now, everything just tastes like green beans. How did the protagonist unintentionally accelerate the inevitable outcome for Granddad in the narrative? What technological term is humorously associated with Granddad's final words, creating an unexpected twist in the story? How does the protagonist describe the eerie recurrence of strange events linked to Granddad, even after his passing? Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay informed about our latest content.